Ever since I was a little girl, I dreamt of a perfect life. In my mind, it was simple. A beautiful house with a white picket fence, a lush green garden, and a friendly dog running around. That vision was what kept me going as I worked tirelessly through my 20s, pouring myself into my job as an office worker. By the time I turned 32, I had saved enough money to buy my own home. It wasn't the fairy tale house I had imagined, but it was mine, and that was enough for me. For a while, at least. As the excitement of having my own place began to wear off, reality set in. The house that was supposed to be my sanctuary slowly became a place of tension. What I thought would be a peaceful home soon turned into something closer to a chaotic dormitory, filled with stress and disappointment. My relationship with my husband, Steve, also started to unravel, and it became clear that the life I thought I was building was slipping through my fingers. Before Steve came into my life, there was constant pressure from my family, especially my father, to get married. After my mother passed away when I was young, my father had raised me and my brother on his own. He wanted the best for us, and while my brother got married early and settled down with his own family, I remained focused on my career. As I hit my late 20s, my friends all seemed to be getting married, and I couldn't help but feel like I was falling behind. Every time I visited home, my father would ask, "When will you show me grandchildren?" His words cut deeper every time. They made me dread going home, so my visits became less frequent. The sense of urgency grew, and soon I found myself actively searching for a partner, almost out of desperation. That's when I met Steve. He seemed perfect at first, and I convinced myself that he was the answer to my problems. Steve and I got along well in the beginning. He was kind, caring, and supportive, or so it seemed. When he proposed, I was thrilled, thinking I had finally found the happiness I had been searching for. After the engagement, Steve took me to meet his family. I was nervous but hopeful. However, what greeted me at their home was far from what I had imagined. Steve's family was loud, chaotic, and overwhelming. His grandparents, parents, brother, sister-in-law, and their 2 young children all lived together in a cramped, aging house. I felt like I had walked into a storm. I had pictured a quiet meeting with just his parents, but instead, it felt like I was stepping into a dormitory filled with noise and disorder. Despite my discomfort, Steve's family welcomed me warmly, and I tried my best to fit in. But deep down, I knew this was not the life I had envisioned. The sense of unease lingered, but I pushed it aside, thinking that once Steve and I had our own home, things would get better. After we got married, Steve and I moved into a small apartment with our cat, Candy. At first, everything seemed fine. We didn't have children, but we had each other, and our life was peaceful. Steve helped around the house, and Candy grew attached to him. I thought I had finally found my happily ever after. However, cracks started to show, especially when it came to Steve's family. His brother's family, still living with his parents, seemed to struggle more each day. Vanessa, my sister-in-law, worked full-time while her husband stayed home, unemployed. She always looked exhausted, and every time we visited, I could feel the tension in the air. Steve, however, laughed off the situation, saying it was just temporary until his brother found a job. But time passed, and nothing changed. Slowly, the realization crept in that Steve's family had no intention of altering their chaotic lifestyle, and Steve seemed blind to it all. Despite the growing tension, Steve surprised me one day by suggesting we build our own house. I couldn't believe it. For as long as I could remember, I had dreamed of having a beautiful home of my own, and now it seemed like that dream was finally coming true. Excited, I shared my vision with Steve. A lovely house with a garden where we could raise a dog, just like the one in my childhood fantasies. Steve seemed just as excited as I was, and we spent the next several months visiting model homes and talking to builders. After a year of planning and saving, our dream home was completed. I was overjoyed, convinced that this house would be the fresh start we needed. Little did I know that moving into this house would set off a chain of events that would change everything. The excitement of moving into our new home didn't last long. On the first weekend after we moved in, Steve's family came over for a housewarming. I expected a small gathering, but it turned into a full-blown invasion. Steve's parents, brother, Vanessa, and their 2 kids filled the house with noise and chaos. His brother even jumped onto our bed, and the kids ran around, chasing Candy, who was terrified and hid under the furniture. It was overwhelming. Steve and his brothers started drinking with their father, while Vanessa and I were left to take care of everything, preparing food and cleaning up after the mess they made. It was the beginning of a pattern that would repeat itself every weekend. Steve's family treated our home like a party house, with no regard for the fact that it was supposed to be our peaceful sanctuary. My patience began to wear thin, but I kept quiet, not wanting to cause any friction. As time went on, the visits from Steve's family became more frequent. Every weekend they would show up unannounced, take over the house, and leave me and Vanessa to do all the work. The noise, the mess, and the constant disruption became unbearable. I felt like a guest in my own home, with no control over anything. The final straw came when I got sick with a cold and asked Steve to pick up something simple for dinner. He came home with fried chicken, something I couldn't even stomach. When I asked why he didn't get something else, he looked at me blankly and said, "You need to eat properly to get better, Janet." His lack of consideration was shocking. I realized then that Steve didn't care about my needs. He only cared about keeping up appearances and pleasing his family. That night, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this. Not long after, I had to leave for a business trip. I was gone for several days, and when I returned, I was met with a shocking sight. As I approached the house, I could hear loud laughter coming from inside. It was so noisy that I thought a party was going on. When I walked through the door, I found Steve's entire family there: his parents, his brother, Vanessa, and even an unfamiliar woman sitting on the sofa. The house was a mess, with shoes scattered everywhere and the walls covered in children's scribbles. I was speechless. Steve, already drunk, greeted me casually as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, Janet, you're back," he said, slurring his words. I asked him what was going on, and he explained that a storm had caused severe damage to their family home, so they had all decided to move in with us, without even asking me. I was furious, but tried to stay calm. As I stood there, trying to process everything, I suddenly realized that I hadn't seen Candy, our cat. I asked Steve and the others where she was, but no one had seen her. Panic set in as I searched the house, calling her name. Finally, one of my nephews spoke up. "Grandpa opened the window to smoke and Candy slipped out," he said, almost casually. I felt my heart drop. I loved Candy, and the thought of her being lost because of their carelessness was too much to bear. When I confronted Steve, he shrugged and said, "If she's gone, we can just get a new one." His indifference was like a slap in the face. That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. The man I had married was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. It was time to leave. I had been preparing for this moment for some time, and that night, I calmly handed Steve the divorce papers I had already drawn up. He was stunned. "Are you serious?" he asked, disbelief written across his face. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. "Sign them." Steve hesitated, but eventually, he picked up the pen and signed. His parents tried to protest, but I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let them control my life any longer. I packed my bags, ready to leave. But before I walked out the door, I handed Vanessa her own set of divorce papers. She had confided in me about her husband's affair, and I knew she was ready to make her own escape. With a look of determination, Vanessa told her husband to sign the papers as well. He laughed, thinking it was a joke, but Vanessa wasn't joking. She was done. Vanessa and I left that night, taking Steve's grandparents with us. They had been mistreated by their own family for too long, and it was time for them to leave as well. As we walked out the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was free. The months that followed were challenging but liberating. I found a small apartment in my hometown and focused on rebuilding my life. Vanessa moved out of state with her children, accepting a job offer from a close friend. We stayed in touch, and I was happy to hear that she was finally living the life she deserved. As for Steve and his family, they were left to deal with the mess they had created. The mortgage on the house quickly fell into arrears, and the bank eventually foreclosed on it. Steve called me, begging me to come back, but I had already blocked his number. I was done with that chapter of my life. Now, I live a peaceful life with my beloved cat, Candy, who was found and returned to me by a kind neighbor. I've saved enough money to start building my own house, the one I've always dreamed of. A house filled with love and warmth, not chaos and stress. Looking back, I realized that the house itself was never the problem. It was the people who lived in it. By freeing myself from Steve and his toxic family, I finally found the happiness I had been searching for. Life may not have turned out the way I originally planned, but in many ways, it's even better. I have my independence, my peace, and a future that I'm excited about. Someday, I hope to introduce someone special at my father's grave. Until then, I'll keep working hard and living the life I deserve.